Yes, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome along to the open house, the Brisbane Open House debate for 2020. Now, obviously, we'd love to be opening the doors of buildings around Brisbane for the Open House Festival, but of course, we can't do that in 2020 due to this thing called COVID. But I tell you what, I think we might get up to a little bit of mischief this evening nonetheless. We're here to have some fun. We've got a crowd here as well, here at Super Ordinary. Oh, how noisy they are already. I love that. You'll meet the teams in a second as well. My name's Craig Zonca. I'm from ABC Radio here in Brisbane. I'm your MC for the night. I will try to keep some order with our two teams who, well, I'm a little worried about the team for the negative. You'll meet them in a moment. Because I'm just concerned about the dress sense that they've already employed. And then the team for the affirmative, all dressed in black, so there has been some coordination happening here. And when it's all about individualism and design, it just makes me think of what they have been up to. So obviously, would like to acknowledge the traditional owners on the lands on which we are gathering tonight, and elders past, present, and emerging. But let's get into it. So, we're here at Super Ordinary in the city, but you may be watching from wherever you are, the comfort of your lounge room, in your car. Here in the southeast, we've seen a little bit of rain on the roof over the past few hours, which has just been fantastic. Brisbane Open House is a wonderful series of events. This year it has slightly changed, and that means a number of speakers that you'll hear from over the next week or so. The full program is up on the Brisbane Open House website, brisbaneopenhouse.com.au. This is a fundraising event, so obviously you're a part of it already. Thank you very much for being involved. If you'd like to donate further, you can do so. We will gladly accept those as well at brisbaneopenhouse.com.au. The question for tonight's debate is this: is individualism the antithesis of good design? And when you ponder that question, and thinking about it this afternoon as I heard that pitter-patter of rain on the roof, I was thinking about the creativity of individuals that you see displayed in buildings around the world where you travel, whether it be something like the Sydney Opera House, for example, the Guggenheim in Bilbao in Spain, Gaudi's, and I'll choose a couple of Spanish examples here because I've loved my travels and backpacking through Spain over the past decade or so. But in Barcelona, those great works of Gaudi, including the Sagrada Familia, which has only been finished, in the past couple of years itself. But even buildings like the Empire State in New York or the home of Lloyd's of London are masterpieces in their own right. But does that creativity mean good design? Those celebrated individual designs, they become those cultural icons, don't they? Tourists flock there, they want their selfies, their Instagram pics in front of them. But what about the broader impact on the streetscape, on the city plan? How do we balance that creativity and then community good? This cohesion and a sense of togetherness, what we should be seeking here in our cities, whether it be in Brisbane, around the rest of the country, or more globally. And then what role does green space need to play in that built environment? These are some of the themes that you might hear over the next hour or so. We have an impressive lineup of speakers here tonight, so let me introduce you to the affirmative team. A round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen, if you would. Alice Hampson is the principal of AHA Architecture. I've got that right, Alice. Thank you very much. We have Peter Edwards, a director at Archipelago. A round of applause as well for Peter. And keep it going for Kate Merrick, the director at Urbis. So, you've met the affirmative team. Now for those on the opposite side of the equation, effectively arguing that individualism is actually good design. We have Melody Chen, a director of Atelier Chen Hung. A round of applause, please. Keep that going for Tim Benetton, a director of Tim Benetton Architects. And for Rebecca McIntosh, media identity arts advocate, otherwise known as Beck Mac. And then there are the judges that you should meet as well. So follow me. Come on, here we go. And around we go. Ah, look at that. Whew. There's another camera. How good is that? Cameron Bruin, good evening to you, sir. Thank you very much for being here. So, Cameron Bruin is the Dean and Head of School at the University of Queensland's School of Architecture. I've got quite the spiel to read on you, Cameron. Oh, well, how many books have you co-edited? There's a few, aren't there? How many books is it up to now?
4.
4 books, the most recent being?
Today.
That's right. Documenting architecture in Australia in the first 2 decades of the 21st century. We have Lindy Johnson. Round of applause, please. Keep it going as well. From Lindy Johnson Creative, which provides marketing, business development and publicity and media services to leading architectural and design firms here in Australia, across the Tasman to New Zealand, and also in the UK. Round of applause for Lindy, please. Thank you very much. And rounding out our judging panel tonight is Catherine Bull. We've got a small but enthusiastic crowd. I do like it here. And your hands will get very sore by the end of the evening because I like plenty of applause, as you're probably gathering already. So Catherine Bull is an Emeritus Professor of Landscape Architecture at the University of Melbourne and an Adjunct Professor at QUT, but her lifelong focus has been on improving urban design and development in cities right across Australia. So, ladies and gentlemen, another round of applause for our judging panel. Okay, so now we need to work out who's going first. That means, has anyone got a coin? We're living in this cashless society now, aren't we? You've got an app for that. Hang on. No, it's okay, Peter. Here's one I prepared earlier. Okay, so affirmative team, because you're on my left, I'll give you the call. Okay, here we go. Oh, what will it be? Heads it is. Would you like to start, or would you like to let the negative team begin? You'd like to start off. Okay, so here we go. We're delving straight into it with the affirmative team tonight, ladies and gentlemen. There are some rules that we need to follow. So, how does it work tonight? The judges have a series of criteria that they will be marking against. Let me tell you about those. Cameron, before you write on that piece of paper in front of you. Okay, so the marking criteria for the judges are, they'll be scoring the argument of the teams, the evidence that they present, and the articulation and etiquette. Etiquette, that's interesting tonight.
Well, we're hoping that they're very polite in their
Catherine
arguments.
Bull.
They're civil.
They're civil in their arguments.
Yes,
Okay.
I mean, the country is awash with people being uncivil about their arguments, so, you know, or the world at the present time. So we're just hoping these people can teach the world a thing or two about civil argument.
I like how this could go.
There might
Cameron.
also be some bonus points for lack of etiquette.
Okay. So we see how this is being set up by our judges this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, so the ground rules also include the fact that I have a little bell, which I will ring first at the 4-minute mark. At the 5-minute mark, it will be a longer bell. The judges are ruthless in their timekeeping as well. Points off if you go over 5 minutes. They have assured me of that. We're keeping to a strict time schedule because people like me need to be in bed early to get up at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning to host breakfast on ABC Radio Brisbane. That's plug number 3. I think I've gotten in there so far tonight. Okay, so let's kick things off, and to do so for the affirmative team. And don't forget the debate topic is individualism, the antithesis of good design. Would you please put your hands together? Batting for the affirmative team, Alice Hampson, Director of AHA Architects, or Alice Hampson Architects. She is an architect, writer, installation artist, historian and heritage consultant. She's currently the National President-elect of the Royal Australian Institute of Architects, a member of the Queensland Heritage Council, the Board of Architects Queensland, the Official Residence Advisory Committee for Prime Minister and Cabinet, the Queensland Urban Design and Places Panel, and the Independent Expert Design Advisory Panel for the Queensland Cultural Centre. In her spare time, no, that's all I have for Alice Hampson. So, ladies and gentlemen, would you please welcome Alice to the microphone.
What can an architect do alone without collaborators, without the client, without the contractor, without the subcontractors, without the engineer, without the other consultants needed to make and create a functional structure of purpose, going to the extreme without the people that make the architect's tools, the pencil, the paper, the bricks and the mortar. Hunter-Wasser said, only when architect, bricklayer and client are a unity or one and the same person can we speak of architecture. Everything else is not architecture, but a criminal act which has taken on form. Good evening, Chairman Craig, Zonca and our sobriety of judges. Our all-female affirmative team are the debating virgins. You may think that's a slight exaggeration, but when you hear Pierre's voice, you'll have little doubt. Individualism is the antithesis of good design. Individualism is a self-centered feeling or self-centered conduct. It is egotism. Architects are egotists by their own design. They have designed themselves into a re-entered corner, bricked themselves behind their arrogance, vanished up their own vent pipes. Individuals have not started living until they rise above the narrow confines of individualistic concerns to the broader concerns of all of humanity. Antithesis means the direct opposite of something, of course. What's good design? Turning to Google, she said, the greatest example of good design is the human body. Well, obviously not this temple, but every organ is an extraordinary invention and every cell works in symbiotic unison. It's a pure wonder. That said, there are a few ancillary useless bits. The appendix, wisdom teeth, nipple on men. Good design has utility and purpose. Good design is evolution and collaboration, the absolute opposite of egotism. Our team, second speaker, Pierre Edwards, and our final speaker, Kate Merrick. I mentioned earlier that we are all debating virgins, but I knew Kate and Pierre before they even became virgins. Let's think about bricks. I found Rome as a city of bricks and left it as a city of marble. That's egotist Caesar Augustus degenerating, can't even say it, the most ancient and versatile and greatest of building materials, the brick. Bricks haven't changed much over time. The shape and size do not differ greatly wherever they are made. They are sized to fit the human hand, shaped such that the width is half the length. The mysterious and majestic history of the brick, the humble cuboid, is everywhere. The biggest man-made structure, the Great Wall of China, Siena's Palazzo, Florence Duomo, Hampton Court Palace, the Hagia Sophia, the Chrysler Building, even the Taj Mahal, all brick, brick, brick. Then Frank Lloyd Wright, egotist poster boy for individualism, said, I can make a brick worth its weight in gold. Good design is never the sole work of an individual. If I have seen Father, Isaac Newton wrote in 1675, it is by standing on the shoulders of greats. Standing on the shoulders of greats is a necessary part of creativity, of innovation and of development. It is vital to the evolution of our civilization. Imagine our beloved Paris. No, not as we know it, but as a heterotopic city, a city riddled with individuality, all designed to scream of the individual designer. Say, a Philip Stark next to a Gordy Gowdy, next to especially Frank Lloyd Wright, next to an even Frank Aguirre, a Rem Koolhaas, an Oscar Niemeyer. And not a single thoroughfare, not just a postcode, an entire metropolis, all grotesquely competing for attention. Stark, the designer who brought us the hand-burning kettle or the face-squirting lemon juicer. Let's be thankful that he never got his ultimate wish, which was to design the perfect tampon, believe it or not. God complex Frank Lloyd Wright said, yes, we all do God's work. Adding to another, he said, you do it your way and I do it his way. I mean, the arrogance. Frank Gehry said, I don't know why people hire architects and then tell them what to do. Rem Koolhaas proclaimed, Bigness is no longer part of urban issue. Its subcontext is buck context. The individual without understanding humility is responsible for the very worst of designs. The motorcycle ashtray, the pogo stick crutches, the shoebrella, which is tiny little umbrellas that you clip to your shoes, the frisbee party platter, the grocery cart hoodie. Personally, I prefer my grocery cart circumcised. I get $100 for saying that. There was a bet. COVID has sprung a feast of useful pandemic inventions for never leaving the couch, the Zoom PJs, or the selfie slipper. So, boys and girls, in conclusion, before the bell, the purpose of good design is purpose. I began with the Austrian-born architect Hundertwasser. His anti-egotism made him so unpopular with his egotistical Viennese colleagues that later he relocated himself as far away as possible to New Zealand. Hundertwasser died in Queensland waters during a 2000 cruise aboard the Queen Elizabeth II. He should have been thankful it wasn't the Ruby Princess. But he was right about architecture and design. Without acknowledging evolution and embracing collaboration, architecture and design is, as Hundertwasser said, not only bad design, it's a criminal act that has taken form. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alice. I better just make a note of that time as well. What were we up to there, judges? Oh, 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes. Oh, 6.5 minutes. That's... I know you were just warming up there, Alice, too. 6.5 minutes. Gee, time disappears so quickly, doesn't it? When you're arguing such points this evening here at Super Ordinary for our Brisbane Open House debate. So you have heard from the affirmative as our COVID officer disinfects. Oh gosh, be careful, don't breathe too much of that in. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, now to the negative and their first speaker. Let me introduce you to Melody Chen. Melody is the co-founder of architecture practice Atelier Chen Hung. Her practice has received numerous awards for their highly provocative and memorable houses. Her experience of living both in Taiwan and Australia sparks her curiosity in how cultural contexts influence the production of architecture. Her work has been widely published nationally and internationally. So ladies and gentlemen, could you please put your hands together for the first speaker of the negative team, Melody Chen.
Hi, I'll be short and sweet. So I think the fact that we are here today in a public debate says something about this. Our society really values individualism. It embraces freedom of speech and the individual voice. Right? I think we always think it's a norm to sort of express oneself, and I think it's part of being in a Western society. But however, if you really think closely, it's not always the case. In many other cultures, individualism is not as embraced. In fact, you might get thrown into jail if you sort of too expressive about it. And I think it's worth clarifying. The fundamental premise of individualism is actually a moral stance, which sort of puts the rights of the individual in the center of the social common values. So you could say the opposite of individualism is actually collectivism or totalitarianism. And therefore, it should not be confused with, say, personalities, egotism, or narcissism. I mean, Brisbane people have long enjoyed the individualist culture, the upside of having this individualistic culture, and perhaps forget that during the 50s to 70s, perhaps at that time, individualism wasn't so embraced. And in fact, the people with alternative point of views were suppressed over freedom of expression. And it's possibly the least vibrant and creative period for the city, where the artists and the innovative thinkers fled the state. So the public buildings produced at the time were quite average. For example, the Brisbane Roma Street Transit Centre. Yes, according to Wikipedia, it's regarded as the most ugliest building in Brisbane. Whew. But of course, people my generation did not live through that period. However, we do have to live with the physical expression of this oppressive ideology. And like you said, fortunately, that building is now gone, and perhaps there will be a more appropriate building for our city. And as part of the research for the debate, I did a poll on my Instagram account. I know, my life is very much hinged on social media. 58% of people says no. Individualism is not the antithesis of good design, where as opposed to 52% says yes. And I would like to think my followers are pretty intelligent people. So it is a close call. That's why I'm here to persuade you guys. But the consensus is apparent. I would like to go for a more scientific analysis of this subject. And on this slide, yes, this is a chart based on the Dutch sociologist. I think I'm going to skip pronouncing his name. Cultural dimensions theory. It's a fascinating research based on surveys of IBM employees in 30 countries, which attempts to identify cultural traits and how it affects human behavior. So Australia, as suspected, has a very individualistic culture in comparison to more authoritarian societies. And I also have included Denmark in this chart because it's a country with extremely high quality of life, and the built environment quality is exceptional. There's a correlation between the two indexes. The country that scores the higher on individualism index actually has a lower power distance index. How does this translate into architecture and creativity? Well, the ideal condition is to have less power play and hierarchy, where open and transparent discussion can take place. So this actually suggests individualism is actually beneficial or the basis of good design communication. Well, it's undeniable that our architecture history is shaped by many genius individuals. That's from Palladio to Le Corbusier. And they're all individual thinkers that really challenge the status quo and influence the way that we build, influence the way that our buildings are produced these days. But of course, building is not a one-man band activity. It requires a team. Is anyone a fan of the Japanese TV show Iron Chef?
Yeah, we love it.
So really, being an architect is similar to the head chef in Iron Chef, where there's this talented individual trying to lead a team to make this memorable culinary experience. But the most interesting bit is always where there's a stuff up in the kitchen. Shit happens. So it's either someone overcooked the lobster or someone's chopped their hands off and blood everywhere. So what I'm trying to say is, I guess individualism does have not always perfect, and sometimes it doesn't pan out, those things doesn't pan out the way that we want it to. It's not perfect, it's just like life itself. But however, without individualism, we won't get good design at all. And with this, I will leave you with this image of the Sydney Opera House, which is undeniably an extraordinary building that can only be conceived by a genius.
Keep that applause going, ladies and gentlemen, for Melody Chen, first speaker for the negative team tonight. I like in there, Melody, that you even have polled your social media users, so extra points for that, and you brought some graphs as well. So that obviously ticks the box for the evidence column that the judges may be looking at tonight. Let's hear from the judging panel themselves before our second speakers. And we slide over to camera 3. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Cameron, would you care to comment on the first speakers you've heard from tonight?
particularly compelling. I'm very worried that I'm going to have to be the person who explains to Alice what the purpose of the nipple is on men, but
I'm glad you can do that.
that might be quite challenging. I think on the basis of evidence, both teams have performed very well out of the gates this evening.
A strong start.
No commitments.
Oh. Lindy, any comments for our teams so far tonight?
I'm not sure whether. Okay, there you go. Is that on? Great, Cameron.
Yeah,
I'm going to
that one's working,
hijack
yeah.
Cameron's. He won't mind. I'm loving some of the themes there. Alice, I love the brick theme. I love the fact that architects brick themselves behind their arrogance. That was a great line. I love fuck context. And in terms of articulation and etiquette, mighty stylish, loving the gold shoes. Melody, your theme really strong. Iron Chef, head chopping like life itself, cool outfit, and you got your isms down pat, short and sweet. Loving it.
Well done, Catherine Ball.
I'm waiting to be convinced either way. I think the thing that came out from both groups was that individualism, nothing happens totally individually. Both teams ended up saying that. So what role has individualism got to play seems to have been teased out of that first session. Even though the arguments are meant to be very strongly for and against, it seems to me that it's really about what is the role of individualism in this activity. So I'm waiting to see where it goes. I'm not convinced yet by either party, and
I think the second and third speakers are going to have to be much stronger in distinguishing between the two arguments, or we're going to end up in this kind of centrist mess.
Okay, and that is the last thing we would want.
which is the opposite to what the debate's all about.
Well, that's it. We need to draw a conclusion this evening. You've heard from the judges, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Alice, you can hang on. There should be no bribing of the judges, I will have you know. Hang on. Oh, I missed it as well. I do get one. Oh, there you go. So this is an interesting ploy that I see the teams adopting this evening. Fantails for everybody. And this is very COVID safe as well, individually wrapped. A great little tip for those contemplating trick-or-treating at Halloween this Saturday night as well. Okay, let's get into our second speaker for this evening on both the affirmative and negative teams. We'll start with the affirmative. Let me introduce you to Peter Edwards. He is the founding director at Archipelago. He brings over 30 years of experience in architecture and urban design to provide leadership, design expertise and strategic thinking to the major projects shaping our nation's cities, including here in Brisbane. Recent work includes with the Cross River Rail, Millennium Square in Bowen Hills and the 2018 Commonwealth Games Village, to name just a few. I'm told that Peter is left-handed, he's a Gemini, he's an artist, architect, he plays the guitar, he loves fly fishing, and he has quite the city-making passionista, he is described as here on the sheet in front of me. He has a maverick approach to the opportunities of cities by design that distinguish him as a thought leader and ideas provocateur. And I didn't say that word correctly, but ladies and gentlemen, I'll leave the wordsmith to this gentleman behind me. Please make welcome Peter Edwards.
Heckling allowed?
Yeah, heckling's actually encouraged. I really hope you bag me for my black T-shirt, and I'll give you a story about sustainability in not ironing your white shirts every day saves double your body weight in carbon every year. Listen, I was going to begin with a rebuttal, but I'm going to save that ammunition, and there's lots of it for my esteemed colleague Kate Merrick, who's loading her gun as we speak. So I'm going to start with a rant because that's my go-to in a public forum, and the topic I thought when first read was certainly an invitation for me to do exactly that. So I'll begin with this notion around a discussion on human-centred design, and I think that I'll talk about human-centred design a little bit differently to the way that my misguided, starstruck colleagues across the way might talk about human-centred design. Fawning over this month's publication of The Starchitect, replete with stylised photos made sexy with impossible perspectives no human eye could see, with a troupe of off-camera lighting technicians making marvellous the space that no dawn could possibly bestow on us, adorned by cars we can't afford, festooned with pot plants we can't possibly grow. Absent is any human life that might actually make meaningful the architect's vision, left intentionally off camera for threat of accidentally photobombing the moment by a surreptitious pick of the nose. It really reminds me of Michael Lunig's moment when he asks us in his vast rants, his hatred of the architects of Melbourne. He suggests to us, where are the sausages? And I'd like you all to ponder that deeply. How could we forget the stroke of the pen of the hero? Philippe Starck is an example, the heraldic Asahi building in Japan, writ large with a sectional proportion of a beer glass made in black glass that couldn't possibly perform functionally as a commercial building, with a flourish of adornment on the top, the triumphant flame, an aspiration for the company as it moved forward into the coming millennium. And I guess the notion of how that was actually embraced by the community and dearly loved, but colloquially referred to as the golden poo. And I think that there's an issue there around the gap between the heroic aspiration of the individual and the way that the community responds. Because design that trades on the culture of the individual is emphatically a misnomer. It's born of an intrinsic problem, and perhaps this is a problem of history. The history tends to only... history, let's face it, it's littered with strong individuals. We all know them, the heroes of history. But let's be real that the remarkable is the thing that we actually remark on. That becomes history. But the ordinary and the everyday is difficult to document in the same way, but is fundamental and no less important. We are talking about design today and its relationship to individualism. We're not talking about art or performance. We're not talking about icons. We're not talking about the triumphs of sport. We're not talking about all of those heroes that we embrace every day. We're certainly not talking about the US presidential campaign. And we're certainly not talking about that guy. Oh, sorry, hang on a second. That guy. And we really just need to kind of understand that all of the noisy things that cram the marketplace of information, that fill up our feeds, that infect our busy days, this is the scream of the individual. The noisy, the nefarious sometimes individual. And they can corner that market. They can take away from us our focus. Because design is a contract between the architect and society, with people at its centre. 4 billion years went into making us who we are. So emphatic is that link that our blood has the same salt content as the oceans within which the first cells divided. We are all linked by our phenomenology. Alice has mentioned the relationship between the brick and the human hand. And brick by brick, our cities are made. And just as the sea is inside us, we are inside our cities. Of course, that's a metaphor. But there's poetry in acknowledging the humanity in the thing that we make as we come together. I think that we need to kind of remember as Brisbane Open House comes towards us again, and in the future as we embrace it over and over, that we get to kind of go and embrace buildings that we love, that are great design. And many of us will visit many fine examples of the buildings that we love. The Queenslander is a lovely example, and I could rant on for ages that I don't have, around a recently sequestered solar-powered a building that sits itself up from the ground. You can double the GFA over an entire suburb by simply lifting it up and building underneath. You can put it on the back of a truck and take it somewhere and sell it. It's a lovely thing. And we only have to watch a couple of episodes of Bluey to understand how gobsmackingly gorgeous all of that comes together to make Brisbane as a mythology that we can have every day. But I think that as we're marching into the future, and I guess, positioning ourselves against the vast liability of the culture of the individual. We need to remind ourselves that design cannot possibly be to do with the individual. We are all at the centre of it all, that the city of our dreams is the manifestation of our dreams for ourselves, our dreams for humanity, to celebrate ourselves in the manifestation of the thing that we've made as we come together. And Jane Jacobs reminds us of this. As she says, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody only because and only when they are created by everybody. I leave you with that. Thank you.
Peter Edwards, ladies and gentlemen, I do give an extra bonus point, not that I'm scoring myself anyway, for the mention of Bluey being an ABC TV show. New episodes have dropped this week. They're available on iView for anyone who might be interested. And Bluey's big stage show tickets went on sale this morning. That has its Brisbane premiere at QPAC in December. I digress from the topic at hand. And the points that Peter was making in relation to design and architecture, it's a contract between the architect and society. A very interesting point. We'll hear from the judges soon as to what they thought of his argument. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is to the second speaker on the negative. And that is a gentleman by the name of Tim Benetton. Let me introduce you to Tim. He is the director of Tim Benetton Architects. He works in an intimate, responsive environment that collectively values good design, simplicity, and positive relationships. I've just taken a whiff in of that COVID spray. Whew, it is dangerous. Don't get too close to that microphone. His practice specialises in new houses and renovations and recognises that it is a great privilege to help our clients shape the environments in which they dwell. He is a member of a new rap band to my left, otherwise known as the Negative Team. Please make welcome the second speaker tonight, Tim Benetton.
Okay.
Go for it, Timmy.
Thank you very much, Peter, for that delivery. And it's great to see a team all in black and a team all in blue. Peter, you furnished us with some wonderful evidence there for us to try and rebut. We totally agree with you. At the centre of everything we do, it's the individual. As Melody said when she started, individualism is really putting the moral rights of individuals, that's you, me, all of us, at the centre of everything we do. It allows them freedom of expression, self-reliance, creative freedom. Alice mentioned bricks, and we love the brick as well. We've got nothing against the brick. I think the main thing with the brick is you can use it to build a prison, you can use it to build the Taj Mahal. You know, it's up to actually someone with a vision to work out whether that brick is something beautiful or something oppressive. When Melody started for us, she mentioned that sometimes with individualism you do actually get some bad results, and we accept that. To use a form of words attributed to Churchill, we might say that individualism is the worst sort of design, except for all the other ways that we could go about it. And this isn't to excuse selfish or reprehensible behaviour. Remember that we're talking here about good design. We're not talking necessarily about good humans. We may have also heard that expression, good artist, bad human. I think really what our colleagues over here need to focus on is teaching some of the architects and the designers out there manners. They need to get some of those young architects and spank them a bit harder so that they become less about their own egos and individuality and more about putting the individuals they work for at the centre of everything. So let's just consider how individualism might support good design, and second, what might happen in its absence. Individuals really, they do channel forces larger than themselves. Sentiments that were brewing long before they were born. They don't emerge out of the ether or a vacuum. They're connected to community, mentors, philosophies, influences. But it's always individuals that drive the creative vision, with help and input from those around them and all the specifics of the site and the people that they're working for. So design isn't really a natural process, one that would occur by itself. It actually needs, like a plant, to have the right conditions. In the words of that famous Queensland philosopher and political thinker, Bob Catter, who said, "Let 1,000 flowers bloom," and then rambled on something about alligators that I couldn't follow. we really need to look at that multiplicity of voices and views. But I think if we flip now and say, well, if we don't have individualism, if that's reduced or extinguished, how might the world look? And I think the first situation is best encapsulated by an old proverb that you may have heard, which is, a camel is a horse designed by a committee. Could I ask for a slide? So you started off, you wanted something beautiful, functional, graceful and strong. You ended up with something sort of lumpy and bumpy with a bad temper. So it is best explained graphically. I'm not entirely sure what the horse is doing to the camel or why. But as designers, we often are faced with that thing where our vision is diluted. So the passion and ability to try and achieve some sort of unified result is lost. If we look at the camel there, you know, the cleaner might have said, well, he thought the horse was too tall. The father-in-law might have said, well, it really needs a blue tail. Then we would have had what's called value engineering in the industry, where there's budget cuts, and then you might end up with half an ear or half a nostril. So you wanted a horse, but you ended up with a camel. So that might be disappointing, but maybe it still works. Maybe you can still use it for something. Maybe it's still functional. I think the second situation is more serious. And when I was asked to prepare for this, I thought, name me one good thing that ever came out of the Soviet Central Planning Commission in the 20th century. Catherine looks like she's going to argue with me here. Anyway, the second slide, please. So this form of design is often described as soul-crushing. The rights of the individual have been removed. How you live will be determined by the central authority. We might love the order of Paris, but it's actually the individuals that shape those buildings that is actually what gives it individuality. I actually got given the sort of COVID isolation, I got a couple of quotes from people living in this building. One's from Scott Emir Morosinovich, and he said, how good is it to be an individual? Niet. And the other one was from Anton Albanetson, who said, if I had to live like this, I'd move in with Barnaby Joyce. So without individualism, we don't have individuals with a creative drive. We don't have the game changers. All we have is dull, unimaginative work that fails to inspire us or meet our needs. Yes to manners, yes to sustainability, yes to communication and dialogue. But if we don't like too much individualism, we then don't let in the punks, the rebels and the avant-garde, and we may as well still be living in Australia with meat and 3 veg. No good coffee, no spice. So without individualism, you still get the bad stuff. You get bad design. You just don't get any of the good stuff. So quite clearly, individualism cannot be the antithesis of good design.
Well, some strong arguments made. Ladies and gentlemen, could we have another round of applause for our second speakers tonight? Peter and Tim, for the negative, who had certainly done his research and his quotes. I do particularly make mention of quoting the great Bob Catter and talking again about the brick, that it can either be the form of a prison or a thing of beauty at the hands of an individual. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's switch cameras. And it's like magic. Here we are at the judges' table. Okay, so Lindy, would you like to kick things off and your perception
Tim's
Tim's
here?
the front runner. We were mighty impressed. We were really impressed, weren't we?
We were very impressed.
Really impressed.
Bar his rejection of the idea of the Moscow Underground being a matter of great or an item of great design, so therefore something good that might have come out of the Soviet period and loved by everybody, I found his arguments pretty convincing. It was kind of like the argument that you can do with collectivism, but you can't do without individualism, seemed to me, I'm getting convinced.
So Tim was very nuanced, and the way he turned the argument somehow inside out for us. I think his droll delivery somehow led us down the garden path there, and I think Catherine's right. There's something in that proposition that is really starting to compel us.
And he caught the brick theme and sent it back with, and replaced it with the spanking theme, all in one. Pretty
Do
much.
I remember the spanking?
There's been quite a few sort of slightly strange physical illusions
Okay.
made.
Pseudo-sexual physical
Yes.
violence.
That's you.
Okay.
That's you, Lindy, not us.
Okay, but
This is just a warning that
obviously
tonight
this
does
has got.
contain mature themes.
That's right, and obviously good design. You have to be a very mature person to understand it.
Any particular reflections on the arguments that have been presented by the affirmative team and Peter as the second speaker?
Well, you know, the argument about the value of ordinary people and their opinions, and the fact that cities are for ordinary and that we forget the ordinary, I thought was pretty convincing.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Peter. We are big fans of fantails
Yes,
here at the judges'
fantails.
table.
That one I thought was pretty good but he just reminded us that we just love to go over after those starchitects and look at the interesting and the vital. And it's very hard to remember the uninteresting or boring background.
Yes, I think Peter could have perhaps tried to be a little more boring with his delivery. It might have made him slightly more compelling.
Yes, I don't know. I've never seen that, but, you know, I'm willing to think about it.
Beautiful conclusion, though, Peter. Strong with Jane Jacobs' quote. Love that.
Okay. So we've heard from the judges and some advice on delivery as well as we head into our third round of speakers as we switch from the judges back to the teams.
Craig,
quite
you're
enjoying
doing
this.
well. Yes.
You know, usually I just get to play in a radio studio. We have cameras and everything. If you are following along at home, you can have your say as well. Just do a hashtaggy thing. You know, that's what the kids do on social media, isn't it? With Brisbane Open House, or so how about Brisbane Open House and Great Debate? Put those on a hashtag and I'm sure we can track them down this evening. Okay, so as we round out the arguments for both teams, with the question, is individualism the antithesis of good design? Let's wrap things up. And to do so, arguing in the affirmative, is Kate Merrick. Let me introduce you to Kate. She is a passionate urbanist and placemaker with more than 25 years of international experience, along with working throughout Australia. She has worked in Asia, Europe, and the US. Globally respected for her expertise in visioning and positioning city-scale precincts, working sensitively with stakeholders and the community to co-create powerful new futures for well-loved places. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please put your hands together for Kate Merrick from Urbis.
Thank you. So first of all, I should say Peter and Alice didn't need to be boring because I can be boring enough for all of us. To the sobriety, let's get real. We're prepared to stipulate that if you want to ask people in the room who's the smartest, you would ask the architect. But joking aside, our team has effectively established a new collective noun for architects, henceforth to be known as an ego of architects, with their portfolio to be regarded as their egoism. In all seriousness, our fundamental tenet is that whether it be in cities, fashion, product development, apps, or graphics, design is about problem solving, identifying and successfully meeting a human need or aspiration. As Alice stipulated, the purpose of good design is purpose. To deploy individualism in design is the ultimate form of self-gratification that promotes self-interest rather than great outcomes in the collective interest. To rise above the hubris and the debacle of this debate, and to summate on behalf of my team, there are three really good reasons why individualism is the antithesis of good design. Number one, designers are not superheroes. It's a romantic and wholly outdated idea that a good design is the work of a genius individual. The positioning of an architectural superhero working alone to defend his or her design ideal is in itself egotistical. Collaboration makes for better designs and better designers. It accelerates the process of learning and inspires more powerful solutions. It demands that we bring our individualism to the table, but to make something together that transcends the sum of our individual egos. Individualism encourages designers to be arrogant, protective, and exclusionary, to resist critique, to withdraw from their clients and their communities, and to create solutions that are wholly self-referential. Cities may be saved by superheroes, but they are made by generations of mankind, as Peter so eloquently described. Number two,
good design is altruistic. That good design is altruistic is embedded in the principles of virtue ethics, the writing of Kant, and the thinking of utilitarianism. It asks of all designers that they respect the context and act in accordance with their conscience to bring about, through their design, the greatest benefit to the greatest amount of people, and not simply immense happiness for themselves. This is potentially the difference between consumerism and altruism, one being the materialistic search for individual recognition, the other an intrinsic desire to serve the needs of society. Design in the context of the built environment has significant social and ethical responsibilities, and good design is rewarded by the pleasure of others rather than the accolades for oneself. Number 3, good design requires us to harness the wisdom of the crowds. We're designing for people and not for personal glory. We venerate and we celebrate Jane Jacobs because she changed the way we think, and she taught us that in an urban context, local wisdom and community vision lead to more robust, authentic, and well-loved outcomes than a grandiose, often highly individualised grand plan. Ultimately, no man is an island, and no designer can achieve a great outcome sat under a palm tree surrounded by water. It demands that the designer engages deeply with the customer to truly understand their needs and aspirations, and asks that we bring our empathy and not our ego to work with us. Let us turn to the arguments of the opposing team, and let's quickly dismantle and dispense with the opposition. Ultimately, Melody, I do respect that we value the freedom of speech and the ability to express our individuality. However, she argued the opposite of individualism is collectivism, which surely supports our argument, so thank you very much for doing our job. And whether Roma Street was ugly or not does not denigrate its function or purpose. Aesthetics are not the fundamental tenet of a good design. And actually, it was the idea of a single politician, Russ Hines, I believe. Collectively, we can change the status quo far more powerfully. And I refute her argument that we need genius individuals to bring new thinking. Tim, lovely chap. With a great broadcast voice, which is very seductive. What can I say? I learned to fold jumpers in Benetton. On a point of note, it's up to all of us to decide what kind of brick we want to use for whatever that job is. Good humans do create good designs, and working with people to meet their needs and aspirations helps us to do that better. We are not defiling your ambition, we're actually working to improve it or to make it your own. And, just as a point of note, on both Tim and Melody's website, collaboration is mentioned 26 times. So, in conclusion, in the worlds of property, fashion, product development, apps or graphics, good design is almost invisible because it fits our needs so exactly that it is almost impossible to notice. Only when it is done poorly do we notice it. Design that focuses on individualism inherently demands to be noticed. Ergo, it cannot be good design. And it is instead a criminal act that has taken on a form. Thank you.
Kate Merrick, keep that applause going. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would. Can someone get a fire extinguisher? Because those burns were hot. Kate, a stinging rebuttal of what we've heard so far as well. And look, I think in the arguments that have been presented, this is giving the judges something to truly consider. And in the interest of full disclosure, Kate, you are also the closest to the 5-minute time limit as well, so extra brownie points. Yes, judges, just make a note of that, if you would, please. That is etiquette, yes, you're upping the points in the etiquette category. Thank you very much, Catherine. So, our final debater this evening, to close the argument for the negative team, we have Rebecca McIntosh. Let me introduce you to Beck Mac. She is a media identity and arts advocate. Her core work is in unifying communities through creative conversations and experiences. Beck is an artist, creative producer, presenter, an arts journalist whose work includes digital content creation, radio presenting, producing and curating live art events, social media marketing management and painting. We also woke her up early this morning for an interview on ABC Radio Brisbane. Would you please put your hands together for Beck Mac?
The negative team no longer wants to be confined in these constrictive Folks, join me on the stage. Come forward. It's time to release ourselves from the confine and the constriction of the oppression of the shroud of conformity. It's time for us to cast it off and reveal our true identity. Ta-da! Melanie is finally released from the constrictions of the hierarchy structure that has kept her individuality confined and unreleased. Tim, look at Tim.
Just look
Finally.
at him.
The committee can no longer have any consensus over what this wild man wears. He is not a camel. He is no longer a camel. He is a wild, hot stallion. Come forward, Timmy. He even has a little surprise downstairs. Does everyone want to see it? Does everyone want to see Tim's?
Too much information.
Come on, we're talking about good design. Off you go, Timmy. Make it quick.
Yeah.
We've only got 5 minutes. Oh, you're going to come back. All right. The bra is symbolic of what happens when individualism drives design. New solutions are found that may even supersede the original concept, the purpose, and find a new way forward, from the beige to the sublime. You guys are setting the bar way too low. We don't even want to talk about good design. We want to talk about great design. We want to talk about revolution and evolution. We want to talk about that only the game changes that only the individual can make happen, which is for the good of all. There is no doubt individualism challenges the status quo of the dominant culture. And without this challenge, there is no progress, as Melody said. And without progress, how can we create good design? The individual is also the offbeat that allows the semiotic shifts that have been brewing under the surface of time, as Tim stated, and that can change history. And the best designs do this. A great example of this, can I have the slide, please? I'm going to fashion now because we've got a bit of a theme here. Beau Brummel, the man who invented the suit, arguably the most important single figure of the whole history of fashion, an individual expressing himself. Upper-class men, as you see, used to wear things that kind of look like shorts, but Beau's long, shapely legs were accentuated by an uninterrupted piece of cloth, and Beau's pants were really tight, really tight. But he was more than an individual expressing himself. He was an expression of his time, and this is what an individual can do. It was post the American Revolution, and he dressed like the rebels. He wore the muted browns and greys of the victorious colonials after all the Brits had lost in their redcoats. And the other influences grown out of his ideas of liberalism at the time. How could these people walk around, these aristocrats, draped in gold, when the merchant class in that society was rising, gaining power, and started to question, why are they wearing this stuff? What are you doing with my money? Beau Brummel changed everything. He signalled the revolution through great design. Individualism allows systematic challenge, as our opponents state. It can be called ego-driven. It can be frivolous or unproductive. But who culturally gets associated with individualism by a heteronormative dominant culture? Young people, queers, women, people of colour. Groups of people who historically have not been heard, who haven't been listened to, the others. This bra was originally designed by a male as a beige undergarment to enhance and harness a woman's breasts. In the 80s, an individual called Madonna, can we have the slide? Wore it on the outside, inverting the whole concept of its function with its design, and it became symbolic of liberation. It spoke to a generation about freedom of sexuality and self. This is what good design can do. If we bring the argument to Australian architectural design, led by consensus and conformity to the dominant culture, it is the beige bra. Because the dominant culture, which influences our design, has a 200-year-old colonising cultural heritage. One that is about reinforcing the British brand of conservatism, capitalism and the monarchy, and denies the 60,000 years of First Nations understanding of architecture, land management and resources. Close my bra. We need to embrace the individualism of the others who stand outside the colonised heteronormative tradition and culture. We need to hear their voices, listen to their knowledge and empower and enable them to create their designs. I'm nearly there. Australia's First Nations people, all the others, the individuals that have not been part of this conversation need to be brought to the table. And through this celebration of individualism, best design practice will emerge, in which the individual's needs are considered, instead of being prescribed what is good for them by the dominant system. Finally, in these times of uncertainty and COVID, when many of the power structures are being revealed to be broken and irrelevant, we don't just need good design, as I said, we need great design. And we need to embrace the agility and the innovation that the individual can bring to the table so that we can offer a better future for everyone. Thank you.
Beck Mack, ladies and gentlemen, keep that applause going if you would for our two teams tonight as well. Arguing, is individualism the antithesis of good design? You've heard the arguments for and against that question. Most recently from the negative team, who truly revealed their colours beneath the oppressive blue suits that they had been wearing all night, just waiting to burst. Now, they drew the comparisons with fashion and good design, and talking about the role of individualism in evolution and revolution. So has it been enough to convince your judges this evening? Let's get some final judges' comments before we tally the scores. Hello, judges. So let's just reflect on the third speakers for the affirmative and negative teams and what might be ruminating in your mind at the moment.
Stop fighting.
Well, that's for us, isn't it? We're the ones who are meant to be fighting here.
Catherine, your comments, please.
Oh. Now, I'm really finding the issue of, or the argument where the sole value is to challenge the status quo a bit hard to take. You know, is that the only purpose of good design? To keep pushing on this notion, you know, the progressive notion, the notion of progression.
Yeah.
So I'm struggling with that. That's been a constant theme of the No team, that's really what good design is all about. You know, I'm sort of stuck a bit in the loop there. And I have to say that looking at what they're actually wearing under those suits,
yes,
I'm not seeing a lot of evidence of the positives of good design there.
Wow.
Burn!
Especially that gold suit. But anyway, if we put that aside, you know, and think and be guided by the likes of Beau Brummel and Madonna,
yes,
you know, which we're asked to.
Yes,
then
the true fashionistas.
That's right, and also to accept the thesis that individualism is always bad. You know, it's hard. Anyway, I'm yeah. Okay, over to you,
Cameron,
Lindy. Where are you on this?
I agree with Catherine. I mean, I'm confused. I want one group to look after my accounts. I'd like the other group to look after my advertising. And
yeah, fair enough.
It's a kind of confusing decision to make because they both present different types of approaches to creativity.
Yes.
And we're asked to choose one or the other.
Yeah.
And your question, Catherine, is to some extent about what's the right fit for purpose here.
Yes.
Is it about rampant eclecticism and creativity versus the necessary boundaries that might define the approach of a designer?
Yeah.
And somehow in the midst of that, we've got to locate a winner.
That's right. I mean, you know, I found myself thinking, am I always... There are some designers who are great individual creators, and you see their work and you go, yes, do whatever you like. You know, it's fantastic, it's inspiring, it's interesting. We don't want it everywhere, but we certainly want it. So I think that argument was really good. Melody put it right at the beginning. If you don't ever have that, you're going to be in a real mess. And Brisbane's certainly got some bits which are like that. So, you know, hard.
So that is that question about living every day in the ordinary and the celebration of the practical and the suitable versus the delight of going to the special and the extraordinary and encountering that in a way, and particularly the way people talk about European cities, about finding that one great building along a street of very simple buildings that are fit for purpose.
Lindy.
Well, I'm struggling between Russ Hinz on the one hand and Superman on the other.
Don't forget Madonna.
Not a good
Madonna,
choice.
it's fantastic.
Russ Hinz
Well,
and
I love the
Superman.
way Beck, flipped individual expression as a fundamental democratic right, the other as the hero, cool as. On the other hand, equally strong, Kate, empathy, not ego. That's kind of slightly before you mentioned the word Russ Hinz. I loved it. I think it's very close, judges.
It's very, very close.
It's very, very close. We're just going to confer for just a little second, Craig.
Yes.
Just to put the timer ticker on.
Well, that's it, because this is a numerical scoring system that we're going for, and okay. Yes. So what are you scoring out of, judges, if you don't mind me asking?
One is the lowest,
One
and
is-
5 is the highest.
Okay, so 1 to 5 scaling system.
1 to 5.
Yes,
And
a
we're
few
looking
different
at two categories, the first one being evidence and the second one being articulation and etiquette.
Oh, okay. So
Which is sounding a bit Joondalup Watkins, yeah.
Yes, and you were saying extra points for lack of etiquette as well earlier.
Many
Cameron,
extra
so-
points, and some extra points for striptease.
Okay, well, let me just leave the judges' table for a moment, if you don't mind. I'll let you discuss that amongst yourselves. There are the hats of the negative team here as well. So as we think about, is individualism the antithesis of good design? That is the question the judges are now grappling with after the arguments you've heard from the affirmative and the negative teams this evening. And it's quite complex, the arguments that have been created, but then also the rebuttal and the level of research that was done. I was particularly impressed from everything of polling social media users that Melody used earlier. There was only one graph that I saw that Melody had shown as well, so that gave me extra points earlier on, and there was the reference to the Brisbane Transit Centre and Iron Chef. So as I just recap some of the arguments that had been used. We had, actually, Peter scored some extra points for mentioning Bluey. I've just written that down in big letters on my page here, Peter, so thank you very much for that ABC plug. You did have 3 Blueys on the negative team, that's right, but your true colours have since been revealed. A little scarily, might I add, but I'll leave that for another day as well. And interesting, the argument around the camel being a horse by design. I thought that was an interesting argument that you brought to the equation as well, Tim. And I won't repeat what Peter just said to my left here either. Luckily, the mic wasn't on you there, Peter. And then the stinging rebuttal. Kate. I would love to see, I worked at a supermarket in my early years, and you learn to always, in the design of the supermarket, bring every product to the front so it looks like a full shelf, in the same way that you might be folding jumpers at Benetton, which is so eloquently used. Tim is still recovering from that very moment. So, judges, do Do we have a final decision? I think yes, we do. Anne, come on over. Let's have a look at this. Whew. It's tight. Been a very tight race this evening, ladies and gentlemen. As they say, vote early, vote often. And the results are in. I almost feel like Anthony Green here of the ABC, who you'll see on Saturday night. Part of the Queensland election coverage. Thank you very much to Anthony. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, on the question, and to our wonderful crowd here at Super Ordinary in the City, a round of applause for the crowd, please, ladies and gentlemen. For our teams as well, behind me tonight, for the affirmative, Alice, Peter and Kate, a round of applause, please. Our team arguing the negative. Would you please put your hands together once more for Melody, Tim and Beck Mack. And on the question of, is individualism the antithesis of good design? The judges have said, nay. Nay, they have gone with the negative team as the winners tonight on 65.5 points over the team arguing in the affirmative on 61 points. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is Melody, Tim and Beck Mack who have won the night here at the Brisbane Open House debate for 2020. That does need to come with a warning.
Does anyone see what's under Tim's goal?
Maybe we'll let that happen after the cameras stop rolling tonight. Thank you to our judges, Catherine, Lindy and Cameron. A round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of the board and staff at Brisbane Open House, a very big thank you to you for watching at home, to those who are here tonight in person as well. Cannot wait for the rest of the speaker series as part of the Brisbane Open House program. All the details are on the Brisbane Open House website at brisbaneopenhouse.com.au, and I cannot wait for 2021 when we'll be allowed back into some of these great architectural masterpieces that we have here in our fair city in Brisbane. So that is July 10th and 11th. Have I got that date right, Anne? Yes, I do. July 10th and 11th in 2021. Big thank you to sponsors and partners for this evening and to our hosts here at Super Ordinary, the Committee for Brisbane, our media partners including ABC Radio Brisbane for being a part of the Brisbane Open House program. May you have a wonderful evening. Thanks for being a part of it. And is individualism the antithesis of good design? The judges say nay. Have a great night, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.